Welcome, everyone, to this very important discussion with one of your fellow classmates. I am with Samuel. He's a second year WBNS student with whom I engaged on YouTube. Welcome, Samuel. Do you mind introducing yourself to everyone and telling them your name and what you're all about?
Yeah, my name is Samuel Midzi. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I'm a second year student at NW. I'm doing computer science and electronics, and yeah, that's pretty much the basics on me.
Okay, so you're from Zimbabwe. When have you been in South Africa for most of your life, all of your life?
Well, I only visited before I came to university. I visited for a few days, but then
Hmm.
my extended stay in South Africa started when I was first year. That's when I came here for a long period of time.
All
So
right.
yeah.
So you were basically a Zimbabwean citizen from when before you started studying.
Yeah, I did my primary school, my high school, until I finished in Zimbabwe. And then I applied to come to Northwest University. Then I came over to South Africa.
Okay, well what informed your decision? Why did you choose South Africa and why did you choose NWU?
Well, at first I knew I didn't want to study in my country because I'm an adventurous person. So I wanted to go somewhere different and
Mm,
explore opportunities and stuff. So I knew I didn't want to study in my own country. But then I also wasn't sold on the idea of going too far away from home because a
mm,
lot of my friends have scholarships to go in places like Cyprus, China. So I wasn't sold on that idea. I wanted to be in a place where I can experience new things, but still be connected to home. So South
mm,
Africa became the logical choice.
mm-hmm.
And when I was looking up universities, yeah, NW seemed like a good choice because it was ranked well. And at the same time, it's not crazy expensive because cost does play a factor in all this thing.
Oh, for
So
sure.
yeah, it was the best of both worlds.
Okay, but why not one of Zimbabwe's other neighbors? Why not Botswana or one of those places?
Well, I think my mom used to visit this side a lot. My mom used to come to South Africa a lot, so it just uh, made me a little bit familiar with the place. Although I haven't been here at that time, I hadn't been here, but then because she used to visit this side, it made me familiar with the place more than other countries because I had not been to any other place like Mozambique or Tanzania or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe your experience at NWU thus far? Has it been good?
Oh, it has been good. It has been good. Like when I got here, it took a little bit of adjusting because languages, a lot of
Hmm.
people assume that when an international student, you've been staying in South Africa for an extended period of time. So
Yes.
they'll expect you to know the language a bit. So it was a bit hard for me because I only knew English and Shona, which most people don't speak this side.
Yeah.
So, but after that process of adjusting, learning a few words, yeah, I settled in pretty good.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. At least you sound like you've acclimatized and that you've sort of adjusted. But how was your first year and a half as a student in this program specifically?
Well, yeah, in this program, well, I have to say it has been interesting. It has been
Okay.
interesting. It has been
That's
interesting.
one way to
Like,
put it.
yeah, yeah. It's like the first semester module, there are some important things that we learned regarding philosophy and all that stuff, which was it was just eye-opening, because there's a disconnect between the current generation and previous generations. Like there's a lot of wisdom and information that has not been effectively communicated forward. Like most people wouldn't know anything about iconic thinkers or people that have done amazing things in the past because we're
Mm,
so focused on what's happening now, like social media updates. that little short feedback loop of now makes you miss out on the old things. But yeah, so I learned about the Greek philosophy, all that stuff, which was good. That
Hmm.
part was good. This
So,
module this year
mhm.
for second semester, I think it's too early to tell. Still, I'm still getting acclimatized to it.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually agree with you that conventional contemporary students now, the youth of modern generations, are losing out so much, uh, not looking about the wisdom of the past and people like that, great thinkers like Aristotle, Socrates, and there's more. There's tons of African thought leaders as well. That I mean, I could see many African students, enjoying their wisdom and looking up to these people. But if you think of our modern leaders and leadership, I think we're in quite a crisis across the world, especially during COVID and all this time, this weird time of the pandemic. You can see how our
Um,
leaders have failed us in many regards. What I think is a cause to this is look at the luminaries, the idols we have now. They're all celebrities. None of them are real, scholars or academics. They're all in different genres, and it's all Hollywood. So it's no longer the luminary, the person who inspires you to carry out a virtuous life, and someone who makes you think about the world. It's more about these very superficial relationships with these persons who we look up to and aspire to be like. But all that does is makes us want to be rich and famous. It doesn't make us aspire to be better and help our communities.
yeah. Uh, for me, I'm a very spiritual person and also more of a traditionalist in a way because what I see is that there's so certain old values that worked that everybody just sort of decided let's get rid of them, you know,
Mm.
because sometimes uh, if you're on a highway, right, the barriers on the side, they're not there to constrict you, they're there to protect you from crashing and going in a ditch, right? But
Mm.
then if you are ignorant, you can easily assume that it's like a, you can easily assume that that is sort of like a, a block, like a blockade, or it's constricting you.
A
But
barrier.
there's,
Yeah. Awesome.
yeah.
Mm.
So there's certain social norms that are very important that we just throw away, you know? And
Mm.
as the culture deteriorated, there's a lot of things that went wrong because most cultures were based on Christian values, and Christian values work. They work because they're based in something that is genuine. Like God does exist, is there. People sometimes don't believe that, but He's there. So the reason why societies work when they're based on Christian values because God is there, God is alive, you know. So that's why they work. If you try to implement other religions, I'm not trying to downplay other religions, but I'm just giving my perspective. It's like if you try to adopt certain Muslim culture, religions, and stuff into a society, that might not work out so good. If
Mm.
you try to adopt Hinduism, Buddhism, that might not work out so good. But if you
Yeah.
see one of the places which was the greatest country for the past decades was America because it was founded on Judeo-Christian values. That's why it was so great. And the moment it's starting to decline is when people are starting to depart from that. So that's a very important thing. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah,
Yeah. What you raise is an important point, and I'm going to get into something very high level. Right. So we can talk about the
yeah,
metaphysical world. So the metaphysics is about first principles. So how do we describe, you know, the world around us? What is the metaphysical nature of being? What is real?
yeah,
These are metaphysical questions, and there are two main ways that people sort of describe these. And the first one is utilitarianism, and this is where the West has shifted into. It used to be deontological. And what you describe about being a religious society, that is a deontological approach, which basically means that there are a set of principles, a set of rules and standards that must be applied to every situation, and they are unchanging. So it's like the Ten Commandments, for example, thou shalt not kill. that is in all, all instances. It's not just applicable in one place. Uh, but utilitarianism, which is what the modern world has become, and places like America, they're very utilitarian now because they're thinking in this sort of collectivist mindset that says what is good for the goose is good for the gander. So we look for, the best possible outcome. It doesn't matter how we achieve that, but we want to affect the lives of the most people, and whatever decision that is, that will be the best. So, for example, a lockdown during COVID is a very utilitarian approach because it is saying, you know what, we need to protect as many people as possible. Let's put down these strict draconian laws, and that'll work out best. Whereas a deontological approach will say, God has made us all equal. We're born equal. We're all born into sin, something of this nature, and we have to sort of spend our lives in service of something greater. So that would inform the sort of lockdown measures and thinking. So what you're bringing up is deontology. And as I get older, I used to be very much a Methodist Christian, and I sort of moved away from that when I started studying and in my mid 20s. And now that I'm in my 30s, I'm very much back to a deontological view because I do believe there are inalienable, unshifting rules that should be applied everywhere we go. And
Yeah.
globalism is a big example of why this utilitarian thinking has come through. And I think it explains a lot of the world we're in and what we're seeing in terms of postmodern values and really strange things in music and art and like film. It's all that decline. That's that utilitarian thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also want to say something about in terms of, people get inspired when they're looking at something bigger than themselves, because
Hmm.
people as flawed as we are, we have our own challenges, our own uh, things that we need to make right. So it's very hard to find inspiration among people sometimes because they can be very flawed in a way, right? In a moral sense and in other senses, right? In other
Hmm.
ways, right? But so if you want to find inspiration, you look up, right? You look up to God or a higher power, basically God. So when you look up to God, you see something that is beyond you. And then when you look at something that's beyond you, you find inspiration. So it's like when people paint or make movies, right? You'd find that inspiration seems to be dying down and movies just are being remade one after another. They're just literally rehashing old movies. And it seems as if inspiration is dying out because people have thought that they are the ones that are like the top of the food chain, right? So the moment you think that people are on top of the food chain, automatically you develop things like pride, ego, you lose inspiration. You start to think in a very utilitarian way, and you lose morals and values. Like value is something that is very difficult to comprehend for us, right? Because when you look at something, you can see the physical value of it, right? But then it's more than that. It's like, for example, why people have a hard time with money, right? Because money is at the face of it a paper, right? It's just a paper, right?
Hmm.
But then you attach value to it, right? And the way you attach value to it is a little bit complicated, but the idea is just that by itself, it is of no value until you attach value to it.
Hmm.
So that aspect is very, very difficult to grasp fully because value is something that is you can't really touch it. It's not in the physical. You won't find it in the physical realm of things because
It's
value is not
intangible.
something that
Mhm.
yeah, it's intangible. If you like a cup of coffee and you drink coffee, yeah, you drank coffee, that's the physical thing, but the value that you got from it is really, is it just because coffee went down your throat and it's beyond that. There's certain satisfaction you get, which is just beyond your digestive system and all that stuff. So
Mhm.
those kind of things, it's very hard to comprehend. And when the more I think the way we choose to understand things is we break them down.
Mhm.
We literally look at the thing, break it down into tiny pieces, try to separate the pieces, and then try to understand what that thing is, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, if you want to understand an animal, you look at its cells, right, to understand it on a cellular level, right? So that can give you a lot of go forward in a utilitarian way, right? You can get to do things that are helpful, right? But you won't see the value of an animal or its contribution to an ecosystem. Or I think it's very hard to not just have one perspective, because
Mm.
having just one perspective, you lose out on so many things. When you break down things, there are some things that you don't account for because the possibilities are endless. And
Mm.
when you lose those things, those are the things, the ones that you can't account for is usually where the most value is. Like
Yeah.
if you remove all mosquitoes from an ecosystem, something terribly bad happens. But if you look at a mosquito by itself, you might think this thing just bites me, it's a problem.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I think trying to have a pulled back perspective on things, which is not just from one side of things. Try to get
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
bigger picture view of.
Yeah, you're talking about big picture thinking and, a meta view of the world, broader thinking. So not thinking of
Yeah.
things in isolation. We started talking now, we started with metaphysics. So thinking about what is real. And now what you bring up values, and that's a branch of philosophy in ethics. So what is of value to us? And what we're talking about is literally the stagnation of culture. What has happened, all we're seeing is, like you say, these remakes, these reboots of old content that's already been shown. We've seen these stories, we've heard these stories already. Why should we go back and
Mm.
revisit them? We have the physical media that is still, accessible. We could still reach those things and make them tangible. So why do we need a third, fourth, fifth uh, Ghostbusters reboot? I mean, what value is that really adding to to culture? And
Yeah.
I think a big part of also what you're saying is there is a big downside to deconstruction. Um, and I'll posit this to you, and I'll hear what you have to say about it. So the postmodern view is this ideology that sees there's no objective truth, right? Everyone has their own subjective experiences, and that is how the world is shaped and how we perceive the world around us, right? So there's no such thing as objective truth. Science is innately subjective in this view, and largely what the postmodern world is, what the world that most of you and people of your age have grown up in, is this postmodern world where people deconstruct things. So the only way to understand a phenomenon is to deconstruct it, to break it down into its elements, right? So what we see is sort of uh, the intangible. So things like race, for example, there are tangible elements to it, and there are intangible elements to it. But what we see is in
Yeah.
postmodernism is they deconstruct it, but the problem is that becomes your moral stance then. So you can say things like, all Caucasian people are bad because of past history, and we break them down to these immutable characteristics, when thinking like that is completely generalized, and it flies in the face of what postmodernists think anyway, in that it is
Yeah.
subjective. So how can we use these blanket statements to describe this phenomena? I mean, it's completely irrational. It's
Yeah.
contradictory in and of itself. So what I'm trying to say is the postmodern world is inherently utilitarian in that it looks for the greater good, and it does that by any means necessary. So it's broken down everything. So every type of, if you like superhero comics, for example, it's broken down every single superhero. They've all gone through arcs where they die. They've either been gender swapped, race swapped, all these different things, because we want to deconstruct instead of trying to look and write new stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
your take on that?
Well, firstly, honestly, something. It's like optimistically, I hope that rehashing of old movies and old stuff sort of brings a revival. That's what I'm optimistically hoping for.
I'm
And
I'm
then,
I'm quietly hoping for the same.
on this front, postmodernism is just chaos with with a pretty picture in front of it. It's just chaos in a bottle of chaos, which looks good on the outside, but inside it's just chaos.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I don't think this is an argument there. It's chaos. It's chaos. Because if you're saying nothing is true, then you've got nothing.
Yep.
Essentially, you've got nothing. Whatever you say afterwards means nothing because you said nothing is true. So if you say anything, even if you say the sun is up, when you say nothing is true, then it means nothing. It's like, it seems as if it's like they don't really follow through, like postmodernists, they don't really follow through with their line of thinking to the very end. And the very end, there's nothing at the end of the rainbow. There's nothing. There's no rainbow. There's actually nothing. It's just void. Because
it's all an illusion.
When you literally say that nothing is true, then what do you base anything upon? It's like quicksand. Basically, it's just void. So it's very even hard to argue with the person with postmodernism because it's like, how are you gonna, what are you? It doesn't work. So what I can say is that postmodernism is probably something that people should sort of shy away from and sort of not go down that road because, to even have a discussion with somebody about it where you're going back and forth, it's like the discussion falls apart very quickly because you ask very critical questions, you know? It's like, if I want to be because you really need to get down to these levels of stupid and obvious to really get the point across. It's like, if I step on your foot, I stepped on your foot. You understand? That is something that happened, right? So if we can at least agree that events happen and there's some truth to something happening. Because if I step on your foot, that happened. If I didn't, it didn't happen. So at least if you say that events are true, events happen, right? Then you can say that's the base level, right? And then afterwards, people's experiences in relation to the event, right, just shows different perspectives. But it doesn't mean that your perspective, if it's different, then there was no event. Again, the difference of perspective will not eliminate the existence of an event or the truth.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So I would say that. But anyways, with that whole postmodernism discussion, I just try to not go down because it's a rabbit hole. If you tolerate it, you literally just dive until. So it'll probably be wise to just not be baited.
100%. But you know what? Related to all of this, we get into other branches of philosophy, things like aesthetics, logic, even political philosophy, which that's probably the most divisive of all to start talking about. But what I want to know next from you, Samuel, is what are your expectations when you finish your degree? Where do you see yourself?
Well, my expectations is priority number one is get a paycheck so that I can deal with the eat food, live somewhere issues, So I'll probably be looking for a job in my field. I'll probably be looking for certifications like Java certifications or telecommunications certifications, like actual practical things. I no longer want to venture into theoretical things. I want something that is actionable, something that if I get this, it's like when you get to a job, I went for an internship, and when you get to the job, they still need to train you in the actual tasks of doing the job, right?
Yep.
If somebody goes out there and gets a welding course, right, at a polytechnic university or those technical colleges, right? In the immediate future, that person might be well off because the person can do something that is a lot of go forward because they can literally, their skills are job oriented because when they get hired to be a welder, they just go straight to welding. They just told, we want to weld this like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not also overlooking the benefits of theory and what it can do also, because theory generates new information, but also I'll probably want to branch out of the university and get into the real world, they say, and
Mm-hmm.
probably work for a few years, start a business. Yeah, I have a lot of ideas that I want to see through, and
Mm.
yeah, so
Yeah.
probably work for.
No, go for it. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
that's
Okay. If I was a first year lecturer, I would be in big trouble because I would tell most first years to go and do a trade instead. Because like you say, trades are actionable. I mean, if you become a plumber or an electrician, I mean, you basically have work anywhere in the world, wherever you want to go. Those skills are in demand everywhere. I mean, we need people to service these stations. We need people to, work on plumbing. We need these artisans, and I like that you're
yeah,
you're action oriented because it's exactly how I see the future going. Um, because we would need a breakup of huge monopolies and centralization. The future is very much decentralized from state power. It's communities working together, helping one another. So the electrician in your village or town is the one who's busy helping you with those tasks. You're a teacher, so you're busy educating the youth, whatever it might be, or you're a programmer. You're busy building, infrastructure or IT systems for your community. I think that's very much where we're headed, because the university right now has a huge identity crisis because universities reacted to the market and they said, okay, we're going to make these qualified individuals and we're going to send them out into industry and they're going to be able to do the job. And what we find is most students or graduates need even more training than what you've alluded to. They would need, extra a couple months, to actually learn the proprietary systems or whatever are in place at that institute. So yeah, no, I definitely see it being a more practical world.
yeah. And I think universities, they need to adapt a bit, because I think there's probably two or three things left that they do, which is of significant value. Research and furthering new information, that's still valuable.
Mhm.
Um, Accreditation and administering tests and exams. Those are the two last things that they have in their cards.
Mhm.
Otherwise, disseminating information is now something that is, yeah, information has been, yeah, the floodgates of information have just opened. So you can no longer see it as a cornerstone of a university, because you could get an online course that teaches you something
Mhm.
to the same competence as a university, or even better sometimes, because these new online platforms, they they started out online, so they worked out the whole kinks of the system to begin with.
Yeah.
So I think if a university is to continue, I think they'll probably need to create like satellite campuses, like break up this whole big campus situation,
Mhm.
make satellite campuses within each and every city. And the satellite campus priority is just to administer tests and exams, because that's still the issue. Because administering tests online and exams is still, it doesn't seem to carry the same integrity as physically writing them.
Yeah.
So you'll probably in satellite campuses which have exam centers as their priority. So they'll probably just have an exam center, library, maybe one lecture or something, and it will service an area like a small town, a big
Mm.
suburb, and then more the same way you would have like KFC franchises every now and then in a location.
Mm.
So that would be the way they go forward. And the research aspect of it, they could have one big research center where research is carried out. And then I think it's also important to remove personnel who are doing research from the personnel who are teaching, because sometimes you find out that if a lecturer is teaching and they're also doing research, and it becomes a little bit of a disconnect, because whatever they're doing in research is very theoretical, and it's on the edge of things. And then
Mm-hmm.
on teaching, you're on grassroots, so you're gonna need to bounce back and forth from changing your mindsets to grassroots. You need to teach people and the research. So I think it would be better to sort of have personnel that are more inclined towards research and postgraduate stuff. But for undergraduate, it would be better to have people that are mostly dedicated teachers, because at undergraduate level, if you're already a PhD, you've already gone through the whole academic journey. And for someone who's starting out, you might find it hard to inspire them or to get them going, because you're already so far ahead and you're still trying to get further and further ahead. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a disconnect between people that are so far ahead in the academic race and people that are still starting out.
Yeah. No, since I've started working at the university, I've always said that it's near impossible to juggle all of those tasks. Because I mean, lecturers now, all of the lecturers for WBNS, for example, we have to do about 40% lecturing, teaching and learning, 40% research output. So they expect, going to conferences, writing papers, publishing, things like that, doing experiments. And then the other 20% is community engagement. So we need to, you know, advertise. We need to be there at open days. We need to tell people about our courses. We need to try and do outreach, things like that. I think it's a bit difficult to have people juggle everything. It's been a challenge for me as
Yeah,
well, because I'm currently doing my PhD now, looking to hand in next year, and it's very difficult to keep eyes on everything. That's why we've kind of
yeah,
approached it as all three lecturers on one site, and that's worked thus far as best it can.
yeah,
But yeah, it gets a bit difficult. Yeah, Samuel, I think what we need to focus on now is looking at why are modern students at university, why do they seem so disengaged in your estimation?
yeah, yeah. In my estimation, I'll try to have a balanced sort of assessment. So what I think from the start is, like, originally what we just discussed about lecturers being asked to do so many things.
Mm,
That's the first thing, and then there's a certain ratio between the number of students and the lecturer. A person can only be so effective to a certain number of people. Like earlier this morning, I think we're 670 students in a programming class. And it's probably like four of these lecturers and tutors and people, right? Four, maybe five, right?
mhm,
And they're having a hard time marking our assignments for this programming assignment that we did. And they're already expecting us to write a second one without having feedback for the first one. And they're saying you can improve your mark without getting, it's like, I can see that they have their hands full.
mhm.
That's the first thing. There's a
Yeah.
certain ratio that you need to maintain in terms of the number of people that are administering the course and the number of people that are taking the course.
Mm,
And that's one of it. And the second thing would be, I think, yeah, I'm going to have to be a little bit more critical about this, but there is something, teaching is a bit of a gift also. And it's something that you can see it as a gift or as a skill. If it's a gift, then there are some people that inherently have it, right? If it's a skill, then it's something that can be cultivated. So it can be both, right? So looking on the side of it being a skill, I think there are so many people that go through the academic process of undergrad, honors, masters, PhD, without actually having had much experience teaching or much training teaching, you know?
mm,
Because
mhm,
teaching, there's a lot of psychology involved in it. There's a lot of especially the psychology aspect of it, trying to understand things from the perspectives of the students, right? So that you'll be able to get where their mindset is, right?
mhm,
Being
mhm.
able to motivate them, being able to engage them, you know? So I think there's a certain need for people that go through the academic process and become lecturers and conduct lectures. They need to have some kind of they probably might have something, but then I think whatever that's there in place probably needs to be reinforced so that they can be more skilled in the delivery of things. Because it's like sometimes to captivate people, it only starts with a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually, like I'll probably liken this process to that Aristotle's process of asking a question. Because like if you talk to a child, right, and then they're doing something, they're playing with a brick, something, whatever they're doing, right? And then you ask them, how are you going to do something, right? They'll give an answer, right? Because you didn't necessarily constrict them on what the answer should be. You asked an open-ended question, which allows them to be free enough to answer what they think,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how you get them to come out. Like at first, they'll be focused on what they're doing. But when you ask them a question, they actually shift their attention towards you and respond. So let's say in a lecture, the first few minutes of a lecture, you're introducing a concept, and then you ask questions that make people think, that provoke people to think. And then it's an open-ended question. No one can get it wrong because the objective is not for the person to get the question right. The objective is for the person to participate. Because I think we put a lot of emphasis on tick, you got it right, tick, you got it wrong. But
Mm.
the most important thing is participation before you get to the point of tick, you got it right, or tick, you got it wrong. So you can't assume participation. You can't assume just because people have registered, they've come. Of course, it's easy to assume because people have gone through a lot of work to be here. So you assume their participation because they've gone through a lot of work to be here. But then you still need to guarantee their participation. Even though they've gone through all this process to get here, you still need to guarantee their participation and interest. So that part, when you have a lecture, it's trying to provoke them to think, to inspire them, and always relating to real world situations, It's like
Mm.
if you're teaching something about franchises, right? You ask people, okay, so how many franchises do you know? Like, and then they'll start naming some, and then, you know, because they've been to KFC or they've been to this place. So it's like memory is an association of information. So if you already associate what people already know, then it creates a
Mm.
stronger bond, and the thing stays in memory. So it's like trying to always tie in things to the real world so that because people live there, right? People, it's like, especially like in business, everything that you probably go through in a business course, you have seen everywhere all the time.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
In franchise because you've been to one. You have seen partnerships and sponsorships because you were at a rugby game and you saw the Vodacom sponsoring. You know what corporate sponsorships. So a lot of these things you see them, but then when you start to point them out in a class, when people go back home or whenever they go back wherever they go, they now start to see things from a different perspective. They're not just seeing, it's not like I'm just going to KFC now. It's like, this is a franchise. Who owns this franchise? Is it part of the corporate chain, or is it somebody else? It's like now when they go back with a different set of eyes because you sort of open their eyes in a way. So I think that side of things. And then on the side of students, then yeah, it's a little bit difficult to manage that side because there's more students than there are lecturers. So I think yeah, that side is very difficult to manage in the terms of students, but yeah, I
Yeah.
think you,
No.
I need to think about that some more.
Yeah. No. That's you make some great points. I think what we need to see in lecturers is the return of the luminary, so someone who can inspire, someone who themselves is passionate. Because when someone is passionate, you tend to sort of open up your ears a little more and take in a bit more of what they're saying. I think we need to, from, I think a lot of this is a failure of primary and secondary schooling because most university students in South Africa see university as just a third level of school. They some of them
Yeah,
refer to it as school, when university is actually a very different type of place. It's where you should be curious. It's where you should be looking into, subjects you find interesting. And I mean, you strike me as someone who does that. And I mean, you get cases of students where they do this, but we want, it's difficult again to meet the needs of every single student because I think people do learn differently. They learn at different paces. Um, uh, it's a very difficult, challenging uh, project that we're busy undertaking. But if I can just extend your thinking from saying maybe having satellite universities or places where people can go and write exams, things like this, or labs. Um, I'm thinking of we already live in an age of um, learning on demand. If I want to learn CSS, cascading style sheets, for example, for web design, I can open up YouTube now at the cost of some electricity and an internet connection. I can watch
Yeah.
some Indian gentleman on YouTube teach me CSS. Um,
I
you
think
know,
that's the
and
Indians.
I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that it generally tends to be, and they tend to be very good videos. So I'm not knocking anyone, but I'm just saying it's learning on
Yeah.
demand. It's learning on demand, and I think that's where we are already. So I think the university will have to shift the way it does things, and again react to the market as it did after, especially after 1994 here in South Africa. But uh, shift in a way that it is learning on demand. And I think one way to do that is, and you're allowed to steal my idea, you can take this forward if you want, but using NFTs and using, digital ledgers, things like Ethereum and so NFTs are non-fungible tokens, so they're unique. They're basically a little data packet that is unique to anyone. So you can buy music and you can be the sole owner. So it's like buying a piece of art, for example, but it's just in the digital world. Using NFTs to prove that you have done, a specific course in programming in Java, for example, and then you have Sam Coin that is then stackable so that you can say, I've learned Java, gone to JavaScript, all these things plug into one another. And then you go to an organization, you say, here is proof of my competence. It's beyond just, a piece of paper degree. And that could be a way forward because I mean, it's different for everyone. The nice thing about NFTs is, not every viewer of our discussion today is going to take away the same things. So learning is different.
Mm.
So, and
Yeah.
NFTs are unique and they represent, as close as we can get to this point to sort of embody as far as we can, the process of learning. So anyone's welcome to steal that idea, go and make millions off of it. That's fine. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's probably where we're headed. Just again, decentralized. There's no central authority that's controlling these NFTs or these qualifications, these credentials, and they are unique to you. I think that's how we'll embody learning, especially moving into the postmodern world, the transhuman era. We'll have to find ways to sort of embody, abstract concepts. I mean, people love abstraction as it is. To me,
Mm.
religion gives you as much as abstraction as you need, but that's that's just my opinion. Now,
Yeah.
Sam, I think we're gonna be wrapping up soon. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that? Sorry, I didn't give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, there was an idea that I had for the short term,
Yeah.
more like the immediate term in terms of administering tests. So I've seen like technical modules, it's very hard to administer an online test unless it's a multiple choice, right?
Yep.
And multiple choice, you can't get a zero. It's almost impossible to get a zero. Even if you get like a toddler to fill it in, they'll still probably won't get a zero. So it's not an accurate representation of the person's knowledge. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is it's very hard to administer a test for a technical subject like math or whatever. So what ends up happening now is that people have to write down their answers on paper, scan them, make a PDF, send it, right?
Mhm.
So that's all well and fine. It was a very practical, it's like a rock, simple solution. But I'm also suggesting a solution whereby you can have preset characters and preset uh, values, like the same way you have an on-screen keyboard, right? And that preset character set of things you could click on it to fill in the answers. You could have a structured question online, and the person would simply look at the symbols and preset values on a thing that looks like an on-screen keyboard, so that they can structure their question. Let's say it's like some kind of answer with some summation symbols and what, right?
Mhm.
So it's similar to the way you build an equation in Microsoft Office, right? So you would go on the equation tab, then you see a list of symbols and things, right? So having that allows for preset symbols and preset, if it's a technical value or anything like that, so that you can literally build your answer by clicking on those things. So if it's an answer in math, right, that requires you to show a two-stage working out process, and you need to show like a summation sign with what, you would have a preset keyboard thingy there, and then you just click on it and it builds your answer. And since it can build your answer from presets, then marking becomes automatic, because now because it's different from if you had to type it in. Because now if you type it in, if someone puts a space where there isn't supposed to be space, or if someone puts it's always difficult for the marking process when it's just an empty space where you can type anything. But if it's a for lack of a better word, like a small environment space where you can literally build an answer from presets, and then you compare a certain pattern of an answer to the pattern that you put. And since it's all presets,
There's no
there's
ambiguity.
no
There's
like
no room for reader errors and things like that. So it'd basically be a preset input with these values that you're talking about.
yeah, it'll be like that.
So there's this reminds me of when I started learning HTML5. There's an app called Mimo or Mimo. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's got something similar to that. So
Mhm.
you have your keyboard, but you can also use their presets. So their brackets and their like your elements like title, header, H1, body, paragraph, whatever it might be. They have them all as options above the keyboard. So I mean that can help
Mhm.
you build, and it's basically like drag and drop type of thing. And I mean that sounds pretty good because I've heard the math lecturers are struggling, especially with the
Yeah,
with the online assessment for sure.
mhm.
Mm. So that sounds like an action usable idea. I think we should get a postgrad student to do something like that from computer science. So it's a homegrown
Yeah,
solution.
yeah,
Are
yeah.
you considering going into honors?
At the moment, no. No, I'm not considering it.
Because I would have said you should go for it then, because then your postgrad years are is a time where you can actually start making stuff.
Yeah. Well, I am gonna be making stuff, but like there's so many ideas that I've had. Like for example, and these ideas sometimes just occur. It's not necessarily that you crunch your head and think them up. It's like you probably call it heavenly inspiration or something. Just the idea
It's
just comes.
divine.
Yeah, like when I was talking to you about that whole biogas digester thing, it's like when I said there's no such thing as waste, it's at the end of the day, even if you want to look at it from a reductionist point of view, everything is atoms, right?
Mhm.
So, and you can't destroy them and you can't make them. So at the end of the day, if everything is atoms, if the atom is shaped in a molecule the way that you don't want it, you could change it and then it becomes what you want. So just because it's what you don't want, that doesn't make it waste. So it's like if you have what can I say? If there's carbon dioxide, right, and you don't want it, right, you probably want the carbon and the oxygen. You just break it down, and then you end up having the elements that you like. But then when they're together, you would see it as waste. But then if you don't see if you change your perspective, you can see it as an input, right? Because there are industries where they use carbon dioxide to 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 create other complex molecules, right? And they see it as an input.
Mhm.
So it's like that old adjective of saying like one man's trash is another man's something else, right?
Treasure, yeah.
So for example, with the biogas digester thing, is this is something I want to venture into. If I could, yeah, probably just gonna buy a Jojo tank, drill some holes into it, put
Mm-hmm.
some trash into it, put some cow manure into it, make biogas,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to deal with the process of how to compress it, put it in a tank, sell it. And
You,
at the end of the day, you make money from what is termed as waste and see how to commercialize that
mm-hmm.
and see how to put it on a mass scale. Because at the end of the day, everybody's waste that they throw away will be just generally money in a way. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you sound like a prime example of a capitalist to me. And that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing because that's where innovation comes from. And I mean that's why the divine gave us what we've been given is to think of these types of things. So saying that, matter and molecules, the molecular structure of something might change, but we could make it beneficial for another use case or another um, instance. Make it action usable beyond its ordinary lifespan. And I think
yeah,
that's a great example. Everything we've spoken about has been every branch of philosophy, because what you just did was show us your logic and show us your reason, how you reason particular things. And in that, we also got your political philosophy, which could be capitalist. Right now, we won't go into it, but that's sounding very capitalist to me. All right, but I'm happy you
all
could
the
I'm happy you could elaborate on that. Please continue talking to us. I might actually get the other two lecturers, and then we can continue this conversation because we don't want to
right.
keep it too long because we know your fellow students aren't going to watch the whole thing if we do. But but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, Samuel, I just want to say thank you for your time. You're welcome to say anything else in a closing statement if you like.
Yeah. It would be very hard to say something and still remain brief. So I'm just gonna say I've had a good time with this conversation, it's been a good conversation, and yeah, if we could do this sometime again, I'd like that.
For sure. Let's keep doing it. Maybe we'll get some other students in and we can throw some ideas around.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, Samuel. Thank you so much. Hey.
All right, cheers.